Come on and shine, shine, shine. Las Vegas, shine your light on me.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. Join award-winning host Dale Davidson as he interviews the most remarkable people you'll find in the entertainment capital of the world. You'll meet entertainers, sports figures, newsmakers, community and business leaders, and people just like you with stories that'll touch your heart. Now, here's Dale Davidson.
Welcome to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. Each and every episode of this program, we bring you fascinating guests. We've done it again. Ladies and gentlemen, we have a gentleman named T. Martin Bennett. Martin Bennett is the author of Wounded Tiger, a fantastic book which I've read, and I encourage you to do the same. We'll talk about the book, and we'll talk about Martin and his life. Martin, thanks for joining us.
Great to be here, Dale.
Yeah, we appreciate it so much. Thank you for dropping by in Las Vegas. You're a Nashville guy.
I do live outside Nashville.
Yeah, in Franklin?
Franklin, Tennessee.
Yeah, it's a beautiful community.
Yeah,
really
Miley Cyrus lives around the corner from me.
Is that right? Wow. Claim to fame. We need to have one. Where'd you grow up?
Long Island, New York.
Is that right?
Long Island, so I'm a New Yorker.
A New Yorker.
Coffee, hot dogs. My father was a commercial airline pilot with TWA. Before that, he was a fighter pilot in the Korean War.
Oh, okay.
So I lived in New York for about 10, 11 years, then Los Angeles. My dad changed his domicile to LAX, and I grew up in Southern California, went to school there.
That's wonderful.
College in Santa Barbara.
Yeah. Tell us a little bit about your early life. Were you a lifelong Christian, or did you come to Christ later?
My mom was born, raised Lutheran, and so growing up we went to a Presbyterian church, Lutheran churches, Presbyterian churches, and it was just one of those things you had to do. You had to dress up. I always hated that, and was not really interested, but I always believed there was a God and God's real.
Right.
It wasn't until I was 13, I went to a camp, and it was a Christian camp, and they brought the gospel, and I said, you know, I definitely want to become a Christian, and I was serious about it.
Yes.
So I gave my life to the Lord at age 13, and for the next month I remember saying, God, I'm still serious, don't leave. I was afraid it was kind of like I'm checking out, you know, you're going to be on your own. I thought, no, don't. And then into my high school years, I heard Josh McDowell speak, and Campus Crusade, some other people.
Great preacher and writer.
Started reading more books and really focused on, I want to make my life count for God. And then I was in college for 3 years, but I didn't know what I was doing, like many college students.
Yes, yeah.
I eventually, after my third year, I dropped out. I did a music group. I was actually a music major for a season. And that didn't work out. And finally I got to a place I said, God, I don't care what you want me to do. I will do anything, but I've got to know you're showing me.
Wow.
So I said, Lord, open any door, I will go through it. And I was very confident. I thought, well, he's got to answer, because he says, ask, you'll receive, seek, you'll find, knock, the door will be open. And I would encourage anybody that God does keep his promises. And I thought, he's going to keep this. So every day I was saying, God, show me what you want me to do with my life. I don't know, but I want to make it count. Open any door. I promise I'll go through it. If you want me to go to South America and eat bugs, I'll go to South America and be a missionary and eat bugs. And I was serious about it. I didn't care.
Right.
So to summarize, I was invited to a Bible study, and I go to this Bible study. The house was packed, and this was in 1978. And there's this moppy-headed guy with a beard and a guitar singing, worship, and then preaching. And I thought, whoa, this guy is incredible. And that was Keith Green.
Wow.
So I thought...
Must have been an honor to know him.
He was saying all the things that were missing. All the people were talking about, you know, God loves you, which is true. But he was saying, hey, there's a cost to discipleship. You have to lay down your life. You have to sacrifice, and we need to be honest, and we need to be specific in repentance. And I thought, wow, this guy's saying all the things that nobody else is saying. And it was really, I mean, like I said, it was a packed room. So he said, Martin, we need somebody to help us. I heard you have a background in printing. Do you want to help us? And I thought, well, let me pray about that. So I went back home and I said, God, is this the door? And like before I could even get the prayer, I was like, Lord says, that's it, go. I thought, okay, that's it. So I told Keith, I'm in. Whatever you want me to do, I'll help you. So I ended up being vice president of production in a short amount of time. And we printed millions of pieces of literature in the Last Days magazine. We went out did concerts. And the cool thing was everything was whatever you can afford. Keith never charged for his concerts. We didn't charge anything for records, cassette tapes at that time, books, anything. We would send out 400,000 pamphlets a week. So I was in charge of all the production.
That's
So it was great
phenomenal.
working with Keith up to the day he died in 1982
Right.
in a twin-engine plane crash.
Right, right. Yeah, he was an amazing man, and put you on a path. When did you decide you wanted to write?
Yeah, that's a really good question. From an early age in school, teachers said you're a good writer. I remember in high school a teacher saying she gave me A+ on everything, and I said, stop doing that, I'm not trying anymore. And she said, Martin, you're just a gifted writer. She said, you're going to be famous. She compared me to some famous people who I didn't even know, and I thought,
wow.
It wasn't false humility on my part. I just said, I don't really know what you're talking about. I don't have any aspirations to write anything. It's like inheriting a racing car and not being interested in racing. But when I came across the story, actually a story previous to Wounded Tiger, I really, everything started to click into place. I thought, oh my goodness, this is a tremendous story. It's a true story, which I'll tell you in just a second. And I told my wife, I got to find somebody to write this. And she said, Martin, you would never be happy with anybody else's writing. You just have to do it yourself and figure it out. And I thought,
Yes.
I was intimidated. So I
Yeah.
read a lot of books on story structure, screenwriting, etc. I spent 3 years researching the life of this guy who was in the transatlantic slave trade. He was in Africa. He ended up becoming a white man in chains in Africa among blacks. He could have died on 25 occasions that I've recorded. And if he had died in Africa in the mid-1700s, he just would have disappeared like thousands of other people. But
Sure.
ultimately he survived, and he wrote the most recorded song in history, Amazing Grace. It's the story of John Newton.
Wow.
So this story I wrote as a screenplay. I'm extremely committed to doing it as a film, and I believe it will be a tremendous film. I've had many people read the story and tell me, some with tears in their eyes, said, Martin, this is quite a story. It is an incredible story because his life gets worse and worse and worse and worse. And when you think it can't get worse, it gets worse. And you're thinking, how's he going to get out of this?
Yeah, yeah.
And then how does he end up writing the song? And it's just, you're just drawn. So that's how I discovered I could write. And I had people, this is on a first draft, give it to a couple of people in Hollywood, one a Christian, one not a Christian. The non-Christians said, Martin, your structure is outstanding. I mean, I don't know how you did this, but this is extremely well done. Then the film guy who had been in the business for 30 years, he said, Martin, this is heads and shoulders above anything I've seen. He says, you've just got something going on. So I had a confidence that God gives gifts, but it's our responsibility to cultivate it, and that's what our job is. You can have a gift and just not use it. So that's how I discovered I could write. And then when I came across the story of Fuchida, I thought, oh, I know exactly what to do here. But the whole question is, God, are you telling me you want to do this? And so as I was studying the life of Fuchida, I said, do you want me to do this? And like before I could even, again, I'm being really honest, before I could even get the words out, it's God saying, do it, I want it done. Don't compromise, finish it. And I thought, okay, I get it.
And that mapped out the next, what, like 10 years of your life, didn't it?
13 years. So,
13 years.
Yeah, so I came across this story. So the story for Cheetah is the man who, my title is Wounded Tiger, is the true story of the pilot who led the attack on Pearl Harbor, whose life was changed by an American prisoner and by a girl he never met. So I like history, I like war stories, I like true stories. I've read true stories as books, I love them on the screen and everything else, but I never heard of one single word about this guy my entire life, and I thought, it can't be much to his story. So there was an old book I was going through from a defunct publisher about Fuchida.
Really?
And he becomes a Christian, so I assumed it was just bombs, planes, ships, war, 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 and then after the war he kind of wanders into a church and, you know, whatever. And I thought, well, that doesn't really sound like much of a story, but I'll give it a shot. So as I started going through this old book, I thought, oh my goodness, this is way off the charts. It checked every box for a great story, even if you're not a believer. Drama is conflict, conflict is drama. The more layers of conflict you have, the more dramatic the story is.
Absolutely.
But that conflict has to be resolved or it doesn't make a good story. And I saw all these plot lines and I thought, seriously, this could make one of the greatest stories ever told in film, and I mean that with all humility. It's not my story, it's God's story of what he did in his life and in the life of a guy named Jake DeShazer and the Covell family. What happens, as you well know...
Because I've read it and really enjoyed it.
Right. If it was a fictional story, it wouldn't be that great because people say, Martin, it could never happen.
Yeah.
And I agree, it could never happen, except for one thing, it did happen.
Yeah. It's amazing. It's a wonderful book. It is indeed called Wounded Tiger by T. Martin Bennett. It's an award winner.
It won Book of the Year in War and Military last year.
That's amazing.
It has the highest 5-star rating of any novel on Amazon that I can find. And I've looked up everything from The Great Gatsby, Pride and Prejudice, Ben-Hur, Gone with the Wind. So, and I've also had, Dale, I've had over 24 people tell me, Martin, this is the best book I've ever read in my life. And the first time it happens, like, oh, well, that's kind of weird. And then the next time it's like, this is getting odd. Then I had somebody says, Martin, some guy wants to see you at his house. I said, why? He says, I don't know. So I come to his house. He says, you're Martin Bennett? I said, yeah. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
He says, I want to see your face because Wounded Tiger is the greatest book I've ever read in my life. And I thought, wow. So I know that this film is going to work well, not just with people who are of faith, but even people who are never go to church. It inspires hope. It's encouraging. I had a guy at work read the book. He was obviously not a church guy. Smoked cigarettes, effing this and effing that. His previous job was he was a bouncer at a strip club.
There's quite a few of those here in our town.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah.
But I liked him. He was a fun guy. He had a great sense of humor. He read the book 3 times, cover to cover. He said, Martin, I can't wait to see this as a film. And afterwards, after he read the book, he started to open up to me a little bit. And he said, you know, I used to go to church with my best friend's family. We would go every week. But my best friend's dad was dying of cancer. And they said, if you had faith, you wouldn't be sick. And they started condemning him.
Don't you hate that?
Yeah. So they all left. He said he left and never looked back. But he really opened up. So I believe the story of Fuchida in Wounded Tiger and the DeShazers and the Covell in this story opens a lot of doors with a lot of people who otherwise are not going to go to the potluck dinner on Wednesday. They're not going to go to church. But they're going to read the book and they will see the film. And it lets people know, you know what? God can help you, and He will help you. Even if you hate Him, He will still help you.
Because He loves everyone. Yeah.
He does.
We're going to talk about this book and about Martin and his travails in getting this made into a major motion picture. And you can all join in praying for that. We'll be back with T. Martin Bennett, author of Wounded Tiger, right after these messages.
Drawn by the lights, glamour, and opportunities in Sin City, they come from all over the world, searching for their chance to be a pretty woman, a success, or maybe just to have a better life. Be somebody. What happened after they got here is literally changing the world. From the story of Tommy Scott, a former gang enforcer turned Christian evangelist, to the Hookers for Jesus Outreach Ministry, to the heart-wrenching story of Arturo Martinez, and his heroic act of forgiving the man who assaulted and murdered his wife and 10-year-old daughter. Las Vegas Tonight presents an extraordinary depiction of Las Vegas as a city of transformation, from Sin City to Vegas Saints. Las Vegas Tonight, from Sin City to Vegas Saints, a collection of true stories of transformation, people whose lives were transformed, and people who are now transforming the world.
Hello, I'm Dale Davidson. I hope you're enjoying Las Vegas Tonight. The guests we've had on the program are wonderful examples of Christians who take seriously Christ's command to love one another. In addition to the hundreds of television stations across the United States now carrying our show, we have been presented with the outstanding opportunity to bring these inspiring stories to people around the world. An international satellite network in the Russian and Ukrainian languages has asked us to provide them with episodes to be broadcast to millions. To make a gift to support this very special effort, please send your check or money order to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To use your credit or debit card, call 702-480-3989. Thank you, and God bless you.
A potential audience of more than 50 million people is reached every week by Las Vegas Tonight. To keep the important message of Christ's love on the air, we need your prayers and financial blessings. Please send your tax-deductible gift to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. For a donation of $25 or more, We'll send you a copy of Dale Davidson's new book, Las Vegas Tonight, From Sin City to Vegas Saints. You'll love these inspiring stories of Las Vegas Christians who are changing the world. Or donate to the ministry, or order Dale's book by going to vegassaints.org. That's vegassaints.org. Or call us today at 702-480-3989. That's 480-3989. God bless you.
Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We are very pleased to have with us T. Martin Bennett, author of this fantastic book, Wounded Tiger. It's a fantastic story. I've read it. I loved the book.
Yeah, so why don't you tell me what stood out to you when you read the book?
To me, the way you intertwine the stories. You know, there are three major threads throughout, but you know, it was so skillful. That's what makes it a page turner, in my view. That plus excellent writing. You did a great job
Thanks
of writing.
very much.
But the way you wove those in, you go like, okay, and now I'm with the family, and then you know what's going to happen with them, and then that drops off for a little while. You get very involved in Fushida and his story, and then we're back to them. It's really great.
So out of the story, without giving things away, what moved you most?
I think just the fact that through this intertwining, through this interweaving, Jesus showed up. You know, and it comes late in the story. It's a page-turning novel, and I want to ask you about why it's a novel. But when it all interweaves and it comes out, two men who should be mortal enemies end up to be friends, to be working together for Christ. It's a fantastic story. Yeah.
It is, and it's an extraordinary true story. And I love true stories because it happened. When I read fiction, it's like, well, it's kind of interesting, but it didn't really happen. But it's something that makes my blood pump when I go, wow, this really happened. So I spent a tremendous amount of time researching and vetting this and getting critiques. I had some people take me to task over certain things that caused me to go do research for 2 months to figure the thing out. So I'm confident this thing is very, very accurate, and it is extraordinary.
But you felt compelled to make it a novel. Was that because you had to invent some dialogue?
Well, the way I look at it, well, first of all, that's a good question. Let's talk about what the story is and then how we got there. So the story involves three characters. Mitsuo Fuchida, he was the rising star of the Imperial Japanese Navy. He was handpicked by Admiral Yamamoto to lead the Pearl Harbor attack. When he led that attack, he talks about it being the greatest day of his life. And most people, like myself, Americans, like, what is wrong with you? Like, why? What's your problem with Americans? Why are you so mad and why about America? And why are you so happy killing all these people? I thought, this guy's just nuts. And I really wanted to understand this man. And without giving away the story, when I finished the book, I got a copy of the story to his daughter, Miyako Fuchida. And it took 6 months before I heard back, and I was a little bit anxious about that. But she said, Martin, she loved it, front to back. She said, I could sense my father's spirit as I read the book. She went through different paragraphs and sections that she personally hand-typed into the email, again, from the book, what she liked and how she liked it. So I know that we have this character, Fuchida, honestly represented. So he's the first character, and that's only 50% of the book. Then 30% is a guy named Jake DeShazer, a young man from Oregon, couldn't make a living for himself.
Small town kid.
Did what lots of guys do, joined the Army. He wanted to fly planes because they had the U.S. Army Air Corps, the predecessor to the Air Force, but he wasn't qualified and he was too old. So they said, well, he was become a bombardier. Then he kind of accidentally volunteers for the Doolittle raid, is on the first mission to attack the Japanese, and he just wanted to kill Japs. So he hated the Japanese because of Pearl Harbor. Like every
the American version of Fushida.
Right. So Fuchida was mad at America because of international discrimination against Asians in general and Japanese in particular, and how they were not respected like the Germans and the French and the British and the Americans. They were like little league, and they would never be considered big league players. and Fuchida wanted him and his nation to be seen
he felt
like that.
in a trip to San Francisco.
Yes.
It was very personal.
Right, so you'll see that in the story. He finds out about discrimination, and I don't mean some generic stuff. It was nasty, and I grew up in California a good bit. I never heard anything about this, and once I read the history, I thought, oh man, this is really a bad chapter for America.
For Americans. Yeah.
So he had reason to be angry. Of course, it's not justified to bomb Pearl Harbor, but that was his star. But so his star is rising. Jake DeShazer's star is falling because he ends up a prisoner of war, tortured, solitary confinement, and in his own words, he was, quote, crazy with hatred, end quote, toward the Japanese. He just wanted to kill more Japanese.
Right.
So this is how these character arcs develop. And then we have the Covell family, who were highly educated teachers and missionaries in Japan. They also volunteered to work with the poorest of the poor in the Yokohama slums and ghettos. And
they leave Japan and end up in the Philippines.
Right, so they saw the Japanese ramping up for war. This is not a good place for Americans. They fled to the Philippines, where they felt they would be safe because General Douglas MacArthur was there, 100,000 troops. The Japanese would never attack the Philippines, and if they did, they'd certainly be driven off. But of course, all of that was false assumptions. And meanwhile, before the Japanese did attack the Philippines, the Covell family sent their children to the United States. One of their children, their daughter Peggy, is that person who ends up being a fulcrum of change in Fuchida's life 5,500 miles away. And how that happens and why it happens it's incredible.
It's fascinating.
And it's inspiring.
Yes.
And it's encouraging in many different levels.
Now, when they were in the Philippines, when that family was in the Philippines, it's a harrowing story of them going deeper and deeper to hide in the jungle, and you can feel the fear. And yet at the same time, they had their own natural cathedral.
Yes.
They played music. They sang to the Lord. They prayed. They preached, and that was incredibly inspiring to me.
It is an inspiring story. They did hide in the mountains on the island of Panay in the Philippines, and many people helped them. There's so many cool things going on here, but it's absolutely true. The Japanese were livid at the Americans in general and the guerrillas, and there was a guy named commander named Watanabe, and this guy was the stereotypical sadistic Japanese, and of course not all Japanese are that way, but this guy was a real monster, and he really terrorized the people, and that's why those who fled up into the mountains to what they called Hopevale were fearful, because this guy doesn't just kill you. I mean, he was torturing people. They'd hang them upside down, light them on fire, rape people in front of their families. It was just horrific, and he terrified the entire island with the Japanese. So that Peggy's parents were in that situation.
Yeah.
In fact, some of the scenes from the Philippines, people said that was the most moving scene, which I don't want to give away. They said of the whole story was when they found out these things. So then these three plot lines all come together, and then Fuchida's character arc goes down. The Japanese start losing.
And he was a very bright man, and he could see it coming.
He could see it coming,
Yeah.
and there's nothing he could do to stop it. The Americans wanted unconditional surrender. The Japanese, of course, they don't surrender. So they would just allow themselves to be killed because it was considered shameful to yourself, to your nation, to the emperor, to surrender to your enemy. So they would fight to the last man, which made the Allied soldiers feel really sick to their stomach. These guys couldn't fire back. They would charge with empty guns, with bayonets, at a machine gun, and these Americans were shooting them all down. But the Japanese wouldn't surrender, and that's one of the reasons it came to the atomic bomb. And Fuchida was stationed in Hiroshima.
This is fascinating. This is an incredible
for
story.
preparations for the ultimate invasion of Japan by the Allies, which they expected. He gets a phone call. He leaves, goes up north. The day after he leaves, the entire city of Hiroshima is vaporized by the first war use of an atomic weapon. All the guys in his hotel, I mean, they're just vaporized in a split second.
Right.
Tens of thousands of people killed. He should have been there. This kind of thing happened in Fuchida's life over and over. And although God is a rewarder of those who earnestly seek Him, ultimately it's the good shepherd who seeks the sheep, even who hate Him or don't know Him or don't care. And Fuchida was all of the above. He killed hundreds, maybe thousands of people. He didn't care. He had no interest in the gospel, Christ, salvation, nothing, zero.
Yeah.
It was only when the story of Jake DeShazer and the story of Peggy Covell started to come to his attention, And he recognized, why am I not dead? That things started to come together. He started looking up and say, is there possibly a God? Does he care? Why would he care? Who is he? I don't get anything. So we take that journey with him, and it's quite interesting. I've had many people say that the story was really gripping, but as it starts to get towards the end, they're thinking, well, I guess it's kind of wind down, and then it winds up, and they said they were not expecting that at all.
Yeah, there's a twist. There definitely is a twist. Now, it's really interesting that you say this, that the Lord loves us all, and he will save us or use us for his purposes. And there were multiple times when Fushida should have been dead.
Correct.
Looking at the thread of what remained on his airplane after the battle was fascinating to me.
And that's absolutely true.
Yeah.
So his plane was circling Pearl Harbor because he was the lead pilot and he was responsible to document what's going on.
Yeah.
While they were going around, of course, the Americans were firing flak up into the air, and his plane was hit twice by this flak, but they didn't see any damage and they thought they were okay, which they were for the most part. After the plane landed back on the carrier, his engineer showed him this frayed wire just hanging by a thread. He says, if that had popped, I wouldn't be sitting here.
Right.
You wouldn't be sitting there. There would be no book. There would be no story. He would have
Yes.
just dropped into the Pacific Ocean like the 29 other planes, and he just would have been another casualty. But it was there, and at the time, his engineer said, the gods are with you.
Yes.
That's all he could think.
Interesting. And then when he was on the ship, he dove off the tower or fell off the tower. I'm
Right,
not
so
sure
this
which.
was in the Battle of Midway. He was on the
Yeah.
main Japanese carrier, the Akagi, and it was a turning point. He could or should have died on 3 different occasions in that battle, and why he didn't die and how it happens is interesting. I'll give you one footnote on that. I gave the book, a pre-release copy, to an English teacher, female. She said, Martin, bombs, planes, and ships, this is not my kind of story. I said, it's a character-driven story. Read a few pages. If you don't like it, don't worry about it. She read the book 3 times, cover to cover. She said she loved the story. She said, but I got to tell you the truth, when it came to the Battle of Midway, I dreaded reading about this battle.
Yeah.
But I loved it all the way through because I was right there with Fuchida. And I could see everything happening to him, and she said, it was absolutely engrossing.
Yeah, and that's the fascinating part. One of the fascinating parts about this story is we see World War II through the eyes of an enemy combatant, and you empathize with him. You understand why he is the way he is.
Right. So this was the difficulty of me telling the story. A good story has to have a sympathetic protagonist.
Right.
But you can't be to the point that you agree with them. So I had to tell the story honestly and straightforwardly, but in such a way, not that you would agree with what he's doing, but that you would say to yourself, you know what? If I knew what he knew and was treated as he was treated and thought like he thought, I could see myself doing what he did, not that I justify it. And I've had more than one person tell me, Martin, I had a real hard time with the Battle of Midway because I wasn't really sure who I was rooting for here, you know. They felt like their loyalties kind of being torn in 2 different directions.
It's interesting, yeah. And it's really a good exercise to look through the eyes of others, particularly during wartime. We're going to be back with T. Martin Bennett, the author of Wounded Tiger, and talk a little bit about how you get a major motion picture off the ground right after these messages.
A potential audience of more than 50 million people is reached every week by Las Vegas Tonight. To keep the important message of Christ's love on the air, we need your prayers and financial blessings. Please send your tax-deductible gift to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. For a donation of $25 or more, we'll send you a copy of Dale Davidson's new book, Las Vegas Tonight, From Sin City to Vegas Saints. You'll love these inspiring stories of Las Vegas Christians who are changing the world. Or donate to the ministry, or order Dale's book by going to vegassaints.org. That's vegassaints.org. Or call us today at 702-480-3989. That's 480-3989. God bless you.
And welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We are interviewing T. Martin Bennett. Martin to everyone, including me, my friend Martin. He's written a terrific book, and it is called Wounded Tiger. And it's a fascinating look at World War II and an interesting transformation in the lives of a couple, well, really three people, that it really comes down to. Let's talk about that for a minute. First off, we mentioned in the last segment that it's a novel, and you kind of explained why that's a novel, but it's really interesting to me that a true story has been novelized. Tell us a little bit why.
Right, yeah. Well, the original vision for the story is a film, and that's what I'm working on right now, is trying to get the investors on board to get this film made. So when you write a screenplay, it's all live action, it's all present tense.
Right.
And it's really, really engrossing and captivating. Most nonfiction books are this happened, that happened, they said this, and it's kind of boring and dry.
Yeah.
And I thought, I really don't want to tell it that way. I want to tell it more
like
the
it's
live
happening.
action.
Yeah.
So I started studying what's called a nonfiction novel. There's a book by Truman Capote called In Cold Blood.
Right.
It's one of the most
It's one
famous,
of the first that did that.
Of the format of a nonfiction novel. So he interviewed these criminals at length for over a year, and then he wrote the story in the format of a fiction book, although it's a true story, so it's called a nonfiction novel. And I thought, I really, really like that format because it's all now and happening.
Yes,
it
present
really,
tense.
it's much more engaging. So I thought, one of the cardinal rules of writing a book is, write the book you want to read. So that's what I did. Tell the story you want to hear, write the book you want to read. So that's what I did. And I had to balance three things, which was dialogue, action, and exposition. But you try not to dwell on any one of those to the point that somebody is bored, so I try to keep things moving forward.
And you do a good job.
Right, so a good story should be like dominoes. Each scene leads to the next. If there's anything that doesn't lead to the next, then you just drop that out. So the net result is, I've had multiple people tell me, Martin, I'm falling asleep at work today, and it's your fault. I couldn't.
I read most of the book in one sitting. Yeah.
And
then I ran out at nighttime, and then I finished it up the next day.
Right.
Yeah.
I had a radio host. I sent her a copy of the book. She said, Martin, I don't have time for a book like this. I said, don't worry about it. Flip through, get an idea. You'll do fine with the interview like this. So 2 days before the interview, she sends me an email. She said, Martin, Saturday I sat down to flip through the book. I started reading and reading and reading. She said, I did not get out of my seat until I finished the book. One sitting. She said it was, like nighttime. She said, this is one unbelievable story.
Yeah.
I'm just flabbergasted. I'm still in touch with her, and I've had many people tell me they've read it in 1 or 2 days or all kinds of things. One guy told me he called it, he started reading it before work and we had eaten breakfast. He said, I called work and told my boss I'm not coming in until lunchtime. I thought, this is kind of weird, So
why? I'm reading a book.
Yeah.
Yeah. Not every boss would put up
So the
with
reason
that.
I put it in the format of a novel is it's much more dynamic and engaging than a fiction book. And what I put in the intro is that it's 97% true. I had to use artistic license to recreate conversations, but nothing is just made out of whole cloth. There's no flying saucers in Pearl Harbor, and you know what I mean? It's all true. And generally speaking, the more outlandish the thing that's happening, the more likely that's 100% dead on true.
Wow.
And there's so many of them in the story. That's what makes it just a great story.
And the dialogue is very real.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, you did a great job with that. Let's talk. This is kind of a spoiler. It is a spoiler, but our audience is primarily Christian, although we welcome anyone to watch Las Vegas Tonight. Fushida becomes a Christian. The unlikeliest twist ever, based on what this man's life and his background and his militaristic view of life. Tell me how it happened.
Well, he despised America. He despised Americans. He was extremely loyal to the emperor. He was an ultra-nationalist. He said, even though America dropped the atomic bomb on Japan, he said he would have been happy to drop the bomb on the United States.
Sure.
I mean, that was his mindset. Mm-hmm. So to change around 180 degrees from somebody like that is very, very, very unusual. And how it happens was very unusual. So again, without giving away too much, what he saw was people who, instead of seeking revenge for what had taken place against them, they instead gave love, forgiveness, and service to their enemies. This was what he saw in Peggy Covell when he heard from his engineer, and he thought, why would you love your enemies? It's in the Japanese code of honor that if somebody offends your family or does you wrong or kills somebody in your family, it would be an obligation for your whole life to
the samurai
to carry out, a Bushido code, to carry out revenge on behalf of the honor of the name of your family. And there's a sense of revenge being just. There's nothing technically evil about revenge. God takes revenge. We're just not qualified to do it. So when Fuchida saw this young lady, Peggy Covell, loving her enemies who had done her wrong, he's like, why would you do that? And he became really fascinated with this.
That's the word.
And it's like, why would you love your enemies? That doesn't make any sense. Then we have the story of Jake DeShazer, who was seething with hatred, rotting in prison, seeing his buddies getting shot, dying of starvation and exposure, and he was just going nuts in this prison. But he remembered his mother, who was a godly woman, and he thought, you know what, there's got to be a better way than just hating people. I'm destroying myself, and as we all know, hatred only hurts you. It doesn't touch anybody else. It's just you.
Yeah.
So he remembered his mom, and they did pass around books while he was in this solitary confinement in a Japanese prison in China. And he asked for a Bible, and they got him a Bible, and he read it voraciously, just reading, looking for answers. What stood out to him was the Old Testament prophets would hear from God, he would tell them about the future, and then he saw in the story of Christ many of these prophecies taking place. Again, he had no theology professor, he had no notes, he had no commentary, it was just him reading just the Bible. That was it. And he finally got to the point where he said, okay, God, if you're real, I'm going to trust you, I'm going to give you everything, but you got to prove it to me. And God does prove it to him. And the icing on the cake was God started speaking to him things that were prophetic words about the future that there was no way he could know, and he knew it. This is just very interesting when you see this pan out the way it happens. With Fuchida, again, we know that he does come to faith, but the way it happens was he wants to find a Bible to read himself. And it was very hard to do in post-war Japan. The nation was in poverty, but there was a missions organization that said, we want to bring Bibles to Japan. They went to Douglas MacArthur. They said, we want to bring 1 million Bibles to Japan. General Douglas MacArthur told them, make it 10 million. And so they brought over, ultimately, 11 million New Testaments, and they handed them out all over Japan. In Tokyo, there's a statue of a dog called Hachiko. And this dog is very famous because it would stand at the train station waiting for his master, who is deceased. And every day he was looking for his master, and their heart goes out to this poor dog. But he demonstrated loyalty and love and faithfulness, and everybody admires that. So the statue is there, and I went to see the statue because that was a statue where Fuchida was given a pamphlet about Jake DeShazer's story, what changed and why. And DeShazer was a part of the Doolittle raid, which was famous, and Fuchida was a famous pilot, and he said, I respect these guys because what they did took a lot of guts.
Right.
So he wanted to read his story. That story, plus hearing about what Peggy Covell did and why she did it, said, I got to read this book. So he starts reading the book. Now, can you imagine, for me, it's hard to imagine reading the New Testament or reading the story of Jesus Christ for the first time with no knowledge of anything. What's going to happen?
Who is Jesus?
Right.
What is this story about? Is it a fantasy? You know, it's all of that.
But Puchita had one question. It was an impossible question to be answered, and he asked his friend this question, which I don't want to say, and it just kept going over and over in his mind. It's a question, it's no way anyone can ever answer this question. While he's reading the Bible, he gets to one particular point, and suddenly, pow, there is the answer, and that was his breaking point.
That's amazing. That's an amazing thing. In our final segment, which is coming up in a minute or so, I want to concentrate on Hollywood. Hollywood is a very difficult place for a number of reasons. You've spent a lot of time working with people in Hollywood. You have stood firm that you are going to maintain creative control and not let this story get boulderized, right? So what we're going to do is talk about that and talk about how our viewers can help you in this important mission. T. Martin Bennett, who is the author, he's a screenwriter, he's a producer. The book is called Wounded Tiger. You can contact him through woundedtiger.com. There's a book trailer, there's a sizzle reel, if you will, kind of a trailer, and you can contact Martin through all of that. We're going to get to the details of how you can get in touch with him and how you can help this very important project. We'll be back with Martin Bennett right after this. Hello, I'm Dale Davidson. I hope you're enjoying Las Vegas tonight. The guests we've had on the program are wonderful examples of Christians who take seriously Christ's command to love one another. In addition to the hundreds of television stations across the United States now carrying our show, we have been presented with the outstanding opportunity to bring these inspiring stories to people around the world. An international satellite network in the Russian and Ukrainian languages has asked us to provide them with episodes to be broadcast to millions. To make a gift to support this very special effort, please send your check or money order to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To use your credit or debit card, call 702-480-3989. Thank you, and God bless you. Welcome back to Las Vegas Tonight. I'm your host, Dale Davidson. We're with Martin Bennett, who has written a fantastic novel, and it is called Wounded Tiger. It's a true story that's been novelized, and it's just fascinating. Let's talk about Hollywood. I have my own opinions about Hollywood, plus and minus. I believe that as Christians we have an obligation to do everything we can to try to change the culture there. But let's face it, the culture is essentially anti-Christian. You have a Christian product here, a terrific screenplay, which I've also read, and how are you going to get this thing made into a major motion picture, a $100 million plus picture?
$125 million picture.
$125 million. How do you do? How do you put up with this? It's been longer than the whole process of writing the book. I'm sure.
Yeah, it has. I've been working on this 13 years. I'm 100% confident the film will be made and it will be successful. So when I came across this story and I felt the Lord say, "Hey," well, more than felt the Lord's like a mandate, get it done. If God asks you to do something, it's something that can be done. It might seem to be impossible, like Jericho is a city that can't be conquered.
Right.
And you might say, logically, how does this work? And the Lord says, you know what? Just trust me and just go with me on this. I know what I'm doing. So that's what I've had to do here. But as Christians, we need to be as wise as serpents and innocent as doves.
Yes.
Unfortunately, in my opinion, many Christians have had low values when it comes to film production. So the acting is mediocre, the story is mediocre, everything is kind of mediocre. And then when it doesn't do well, they say, well, you know, people hate Christian movies. I'm like, you know, you got to bring your game up a little bit higher. The scripture says, you see a man skilled in his work, he will stand before kings. You got to be skilled. And it's just as hard for a Christian to cultivate those skills as it is for a non-Christian. We shouldn't have a second standard. The other thing is that a lot of films are made of, by, and for the Christian community, and they're not really inclusive. They're just, they have a very small audience. And
There's Christianese involved.
And there's nothing wrong with making a film for a Christian audience so mom and dad can watch a movie with their kids that's redemptive and it's not got gore and everything else in it. But if you want to reach a wider audience, you have to do a little homework, do a little work. You should have a good rapport with people who are not believers and understand what's of interest to them. And you've got to follow the rules as far as good storytelling goes. So
do it with excellence, which God commands us to do.
We do. So when Solomon built the temple with billions of dollars of gold and silver, he hired a Lebanese craftsman to come in there to do the gold engraving work. Well, why didn't he get a Jew to do it? Well, because he wanted the guy who was the best guy. Now, the scripture says the gifts and calling are irrevocable. God gives gifts to everybody. He has a calling on our lives as well. But even if you do not care about God, you still have the gifts God's given to you. And we, as Christians, need to learn from people who are gifted, who are smart, who are excellent in their arts and crafts and skills in filmmaking.
Sure.
So what I did when I wrote this story as a screenplay first and then novelized it as a book is I tried to make sure I didn't put in stuff that was just Christian gobbledygook, you know. I tried to keep it all real, genuine, authentic. I don't use any words, faith, sin, repentance, you know, all that kind of stuff. I just said, you know, just tell the story, let it stand on its own 2 feet. Ben-Hur, the full title is Ben-Hur, the Story of the Christ. Of course, that was, you know, 60 years ago, whatever. But it was broadly appealing. Then, you know, Chariots of Fire is a film I really love. That was awarded by Hollywood as Best Picture of the Year. And more recently, we have what was it called? What's the football? Blindside.
Blindside was a good
and some
movie.
other films that were broadly appealing, but they're not big pictures. So in this
Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah, Hacksaw Ridge.
Yeah.
This story, it has a lot of universal values that everybody can identify with. So if somebody does good to somebody who's been evil to you, we're going to say, you know, that's a good thing, however you did it, we don't really care. It's kind of like if somebody jumps through the ice to save somebody's life, we don't say, wait a second, was that guy a Muslim, a Christian, an atheist? We don't care. It's like, you know, that's a good thing, I agree with that. So in this story, you'll see those things. Their motivation was a knowledge of God, a love for God, and the Lord living in through their lives.
Sure.
But even a person says, I don't recognize that, they'll still enjoy the story. So what I did is I had the story vetted and critiqued both as a book and as a screenplay prior by people who are completely as far outside the concentric circles of the faith-based crowd. So I gave this to all kinds of people. I had an HBO producer, not a believer at all, doesn't go to church, not interested in religion. She read the screenplay and she told me in a restaurant, she says, Martin, I'm going to tell you, this story is incredible. It's going to do huge numbers. And I try not to accept too many compliments because you can get a big head and start thinking things that are not true. And I thought, well, you know, I'm trying to get the thing. And she leans over, grabs me by the wrist very firmly, looks me straight in the eye. She said, Martin, I'm telling you, this thing is going to succeed. Afterwards, some years later, I gave her the book. She read the book. And then she sent me an email, and she said, Martin, I'm reading the book a second time. So this is her third time through the story. She says, I'm telling you right now, you're going to get the money on this film. It's going to work, flat out. And I've had many stories like that of people in the film industry. In fact, every film professional who's read either the screenplay or the book has said essentially the same thing, which is, this film is going to be successful. It's going to work really, really well. The only negative they said is, it's going to be expensive, because it's a longer film. It's going to be closer to 3 hours, maybe a bit over.
Yeah.
Some people say, oh...
And there's war scenes, and there's explosions,
there are some expensive scenes,
you know,
but we'll get it done. Some people said, you know, people don't like long movies anymore. And I said, well, my reply is, one, I've never heard anybody say the Super Bowl is too long. And two, there's a quote from Siskel and Ebert. One of these guys said, no bad movie is too short, no good movie is too long. So Dances with Wolves, Schindler's List, there's many other long films that did. Yeah, Gone with the Wind. Well, of course, that was over 4 hours long, but that is the most profitable film in history. So what happened was, I got it in front of investors, said, we like the film. These were secular investors. We like it, but if they optioned it, they would retain full creative control. And I'm not a micromanager, I'm not a control freak, but I have to have the ability to protect the integrity of the story. I can't do that if I sign all the rights over to them. So I declined the offer. I have an entertainment attorney. I said, what do I do? He said, Martin, you're going to have to raise the money yourself. You got to package this. You got to attach an A-list director, producer, talent, etc. Then the bigger investors will come on board. I ended up, through a set of circumstances which I didn't necessarily orchestrate, speaking with the president of Warner Brothers in his office at his invitation on the lot in Burbank, where we discussed a co-production deal. I said, listen, I don't want to option this film. I want to retain creative control. He said, that's fine. You know, so I proposed a co-production deal. We will bring our investors to our side of the table and then co-produce it while retaining creative control. That way we can be certain that the book as written is what's going to end up on the screen. I don't want anybody to have the ability to get in there. This happened with the book Unbroken, which was a great book on the top 10 chart for years.
Right.
And then they made it into a film, which was a well-done film by and large, but they excised about 90% of all the Christian elements.
Yes.
I know even a non-Christian said, Martin, I'm not going to see the movie because they chopped off the end.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the character arc. I'm a Christian, but I went to see the movie, I rented the movie 7 Years in Tibet, about a Nazi soldier who gets to know the Dalai Lama as a boy. I'm not offended. I'm a big boy.
Sure.
I can think for myself. Let me just watch the movie and decide what I think.
Yeah.
So I think that, you know, we don't want to take those elements out. I trust the audience. They're going to say, okay, I can think for myself. Let me decide what I think, and they'll watch the movie. So I've had so many non-Christians read the book and the screenplay. Said, Martin, they don't have any objection because it's authentic, it's real, it's not in your face, and it actually is a point of hope for people. In the back of your mind, you're thinking, God could help me too. I'm going to do what they did. What did Fuchida do? He didn't have any counselors, he didn't have any friends, he didn't have anybody. All he had was a physical book. But God honors those who seek Him.
Revelation through it.
Yeah, so God's a rewarder of those who seek Him. It doesn't matter who you are, what your background is. You don't need to know anything. If you read the Bible and say, God, help me, and you mean it, boom, God will come there and He will help you, just like He did for Fuchida, just like He did for Jake DeShazer. And that's the hope and the excitement of the story itself. I don't care who you are, He can help, and He will.
It's been wonderful having you on the show. It's hard to believe that an hour has ripped by, but it has. I want to give everyone the opportunity to support Martin in this very important project. Once again, the book is called Wounded Tiger. He wrote the book. He has written the screenplay. He's working on getting it made into a major motion picture. He's working very hard on that. You can go to woundedtiger.com, woundedtiger.com. His contact information is there. The book trailer is there. The movie trailer is there. It gives you an opportunity to learn more about what he's attempting to do. We hope you will help him in this very, very important endeavor. And we encourage you to buy the book. You can get the book on woundedtiger.com. We invite you to contact him, especially if you have an interest in helping to raise funds. Perhaps you have friends who want to invest in this motion picture. Perhaps you have experience in Hollywood. Perhaps you're a producer yourself. This television show is shown all over the country and and especially in Asia, which is interesting, that and including Japan. So we'll see what kind of response this program gets there. And we hope people in Japan will read the book as well. We hope that you will support Martin. We also hope that you will support our efforts here on Las Vegas Tonight. What we do is try to expose these wonderful stories to you so you understand that we are struggling to bring Christ to the entire world. So please feel free to go to Las Vegas Tonight TV. LasVegasTonight.tv is our website, and feel free to contribute or contact us or give us a call or write us an email, because we certainly appreciate your support. God bless you, and as I say at the close of every program, speaking of Christ, of course, please walk with Him. God bless you.
Drawn by the lights, glamour, and opportunities in Sin City, they come from all over the world, searching for their chance to be a pretty woman, a success, or maybe just to have a better life. Be somebody. What happened after they got here is literally changing the world. From the story of Tommy Scott, a former gang enforcer turned Christian evangelist, to the Hookers for Jesus Outreach Ministry, to the heart-wrenching story of Arturo Martinez and his heroic act of forgiving the man who assaulted and murdered his wife and 10-year-old daughter. Las Vegas Tonight presents an extraordinary depiction of Las Vegas as a city of transformation, from Sin City to Vegas Saints. Las Vegas Tonight, from Sin City to Vegas Saints, a collection of true stories of transformation, people whose lives were transformed, and people who are now transforming the world.
Hello, I'm Dale Davidson. I hope you're enjoying Las Vegas Tonight. The guests we've had on the program are wonderful examples of Christians who take seriously Christ's command to love one another. In addition to the hundreds of television stations across the United States now carrying our show, we have been presented with the outstanding opportunity to bring these inspiring stories to people around the world. An international satellite network in the Russian and Ukrainian languages has asked us to provide them with episodes to be broadcast to millions. To make a gift to support this very special effort, please send your check or money order to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117. To use your credit or debit card, call 702-480-3989. Thank you, and God bless you.
You've been watching Las Vegas Tonight with Dale Davidson. Send your tax-deductible gifts to Dale Davidson Ministries, 9030 West Sahara Avenue, number 255, Las Vegas, Nevada, 89117.
Come on.
Welcome to social media shows. Have you been watching social media shows recently? Of course you have. We have been live streaming for 4 years across social media platforms. We produce over 70 shows with over 1,000 episodes. In the process, we've helped over 100 creators realize their dreams and start their own show. We give platforms to promote your business. If you are an artist, if you have an event, if you are entrepreneurs, or if you have a story. If you haven't done it yet, go ahead and subscribe and follow us on major social media platforms. And if you have a great idea of a show, join us. Social media shows can help you produce and live stream your own show. Let us help you make your dream become a reality.
Hello, everyone. This is Joseph Skoda with Social Media Shows. Well, I thank all of you for your support through these last several years, and it's been a lot of fun. We've given people a voice they never had before. Now, Social Media Shows is always collaborating with our veterans to help them do things and help out the veterans who are struggling today. And we teamed up with GI Connections, connecting veterans with resources. So please consider helping and donating to this great cause because we're always doing things for veterans. So GI Connections, Social Media Shows, and you is what makes the world a better place. Once again, Joseph Skoda, proud United States Air Force veteran.
Have you been thinking about having your own TV show and how to publish it? Social Media Shows is what you're looking for. Start your show with our network and your first month could be free. Inquire now. Email us at admin@socialmediashows.com. We accept applications from around the world.
Come on and shine.